I took over Atalanta, a team who sacked their manager, languishing bottom of the league halfway through the season in an online master league where every team is controlled by a real player. Managers earn cash from their performances and can buy and sell players off of each other, and the team we inherited clearly isn't up to scratch. Now the team does have a couple good players, namely Virgil van Dijk and of course the wonder kids Lamine Yamal and Endrick. So I know if I can just avoid relegation, I have a few players I can build a strong team around. But it wasn't either of these players that were performing the best for me. It was actually this man here, Jarrod Bowen. He scored the only goal to give us a 1-0 win against 13th place Karen Passa in our first game in charge, and then also put us 1-0 up early in our second game against Santos. But this lead didn't last long despite Van Dijk's best efforts, as Kylian Mbappe fired a left-footed shot right at our goalkeeper Providel, who parried it into the hands of Højlund for an easy tap-in finish. And despite trying to tinker around the tactics going into the second half, we couldn't break through the Santos defence and the game ended in a 1-1 draw. But the next game was when the team would truly get tested. I decided to line up in a 4-5-1 to crowd out the midfield against a strong Lazio side, and it worked well as we limited Lazio to just one shot in the first half, and Bowen got through on goal after relentless pressing, but unfortunately it was a tight angle and he couldn't find the back of the net. So based off of the first half performance, I was happy with how we defended, but that Bowen chance was the only real one we created. So I went very expansive in the second half and moved Yamal 3 yards forward. And in the 65th minute, I would come to regret this decision as we lost the ball in a vulnerable area with our right back having fully committed to the overlap. And Van Dijk tried to come across, but he got caught in no man's land. And with Rafa Silva running down on the goal, he curled it into the back of the net. And then the panic stations were ringing. So from this point, I knew I needed to make another change. So I decided to move into a 4-4-2 to give Bowen some extra support up front. And we debuted two new wingers in Conceição and El Shaarawy. And it was the super sub El Shaarawy who made an instant impact, slipping in behind the fullback and cutting inside and rocketing it into the back of the net. I then decided to take Yamal off as he was tired, and right after that, Jarrod Bowen chased onto the end of a through ball and pulled out an amazing piece of skill to put us ahead with 10 minutes left. From this point, we just tried to hang on, and the man who let us down last game became the hero in this one, pulling out an amazing double save, allowing us to hold on to the lead, leaving us with 2 wins and 1 draw from our first 3 games. After this, we had an international break, so it was time to assess our performance and think about our transfer strategy. We received an inquiry for Federico Di Marco. While not absolutely essential, he would fit in very nicely for when we eventually want to play a 3-5-2, which is my ultimate vision for the team. However, at the moment, I think we are still missing a few players to play that type of tactic, so I would be open for a move. The Urawa. Okay, however you're supposed to pronounce that team's name, manager told me to take a look at some of their centre backs, and sensing a deal, I identified Diakite. Now, I already have Van Dijk and Kalulu, so I stressed in the negotiations that we weren't in a position of desperation, but Diakite would be a good target for 2 reasons. Firstly, Kalulu and Van Dijk are both build-up centre backs, so Diakite being a destroyer would give me more flexibility. And additionally, I indicated that Diakite would only be a backup, which would be true if we stick to a 4 at the back for the remainder of the season. However, since ultimately I do want to play a 3 at the back, I think Diakite would be good enough to start in a 3-back team. So after a little back and forth on the transfer fee, we arrived at a deal. And while I will miss DiMarco's crossing ability, I do feel we have enough in players like Ruggeri, Cambiasso and Gosens to get by in the meantime. But so far, my problem hasn't been conceding goals, it's been scoring them. So I looked around at some strikers and noticed that Kyogo only has a transfer market value of 16.5 million. So I contacted the Manchester United manager with an offer of 22 million, hoping to get the deal done swiftly before the transfer deadline. However, he claimed Kyogo was a starting player and a deal this late in the window would be hard to get done. So I had a look at my club and I noticed Vitor Roque, who has a very high transfer value, is also a striker, so I could probably do a swap deal with Kyogo and also see some cash coming my way. However, when I offered this to the Manchester United manager, he seemed to have a different view of the deal, thinking that he should be the one receiving a transfer fee alongside the player swap. So sensing I was being squeezed because of my affinity for Kyogo, I decided to end negotiations there. And we didn't have enough time to get another deal done before the window slammed shut as we visited Old Trafford for our next league game. And wouldn't you know it, Kyogo wasn't even in the starting 11. So we went into this game with a bit of a chip on our shoulder, and Diakite, making his debut, started well, so I'm happy I at least got that deal done. And Jared Bowen showed us we should be happy the Kyogo deal didn't get done, as he began to look like Messi dribbling by 3 players before finding the back of the net. We then saw the Wonder Kids link up with Endrick getting on the end of a Yamal cross, and then some poor build-up play in the middle just after half-time saw Liel one-on-one with our keeper, and he wasn't missing that. But we weren't missing DeMarco's crossing as Ruggieri found himself free on the left-hand side, and he whips a beautiful ball into Bowen, and a lucky ricochet restores our 2-goal lead. From this point, it was a cagey game, but again, messing around with the ball in midfield had United running at our exposed defence, and the ball came out to Rodrigo, who cut inside and gave them a lifeline with 10 minutes to go. So we resorted back to a 4-5-1 to try hold on to the lead, and we managed to come away with our pride, but most importantly, the 3 points. And it's been a common theme at this point, but in our next game, Bowen puts us 1 goal up within the first 10 minutes yet again. But we can never get comfortable in our build-up play, and a horrible piece of miscommunication from a throw-in meant we dropped 2 points in the 91st minute against Sporting Lisbon. So after these games, we finally moved out of the relegation zone, and while we were still picking up points, I was not happy with how the team was playing. So I had to change my mindset and trust in the group that we had. And with this renewed mindset, we welcomed Liverpool, who were just 1 point above us in the table, and this is the game where we had to make a statement. Show the rest of the league that Atalanta should not be near the relegation zone, and that we did, picking up a 4-0 win and then going on to put 6 past Juventus, who are actually 21 points above us in 6th place. And it was in this game that I learned we had a true gem in midfield, Cristante. My first impression of him was that he was a no-nonsense defensive midfielder, not the profile of player I look for in my possession-based tactics, but against Juventus he showed us he is more akin to a prime Roy Keane, breaking up the play, driving forward, and able to pick out passes to kickstart the counter-attack. We then continued our goal-scoring run, putting 4 past Boca Juniors and 5 past Tottenham Hotspur respectively, but our next game would be a true test as we visited Aston Villa, who were sitting 5 points above us in 9th place, vying to get into the Super 8 qualification spots. While we had done enough so far to avoid relegation, this result here could dictate if we had anything to play for in the remainder of the season. And Aston Villa had some strong players in the squad, the likes of Lookman, Florian Wirtz and Thibaut Courtois in net. But it was ourselves who opened up the scoring, with Cristante laying it off to Constance from a failed corner kick routine, and he buried it into the back of the net. And it wasn't long before we got our second, with some great dribbling from our orchestrator Cacaret, who weaved in and out of the Villa defence before curling it past Courtois' left side. But just as things looked comfortable going into the half-time break, a great flick from Wirtz to help Villa keep the ball, and then another great touch from Wirtz to find Lookman, who fires it off the post into the path of Moukoko. So now it was game on going into the second half. So sensing that Villa were taking the game to us, I decided to push my wingers further up to hit them on the counter-attack. And El Shaarawy found himself in a dangerous area, laying it off to Yamal, who found the bottom corner. And then El Shaarawy, cementing his status as a super sub, wins the ball off the fullback before sitting down Courtois and passing it into the back of the net, giving ourselves a 4-1 win against Villa. We then go on a winning streak, picking up notable victories against Villarreal and Anderlecht, which puts us in a very interesting position for the last 2 games of the season. With 2 games left, we are 6 points behind Espanyol, and we need to win our last 2 games of the season while Espanyol lose theirs to qualify for the Super 8. The good news is we have Espanyol to play in our next game. The bad news is that after that, we visit the Camp Nou against league leaders Barcelona, who are sitting on 96 points with 2 games left, looking to break 100 points. So as we welcomed Espanyol to the Stadio Bergamo, I decided to set up in a 3-5-2 to try and outnumber Espanyol's 4-man midfield. The game started off tense, with both teams shutting each other down, but the first chance fell to Yamal, who set himself up nicely inside the box, but the strike was blocked by Espanyol's fullback. A few moments later we had a similar opportunity, this time beating the defenders, but the keeper makes the save. Espanyol mostly play a crossing game, but our centre-backs are able to deal with it and we launch a counter-attack. Some great link-up play on the right-hand side sees Constance lose his marker before drilling the ball low and hard into Gosens, the man who earlier on in the season we decided would be good enough to fill in for Dimarco's departure, and he slotted away and put us ahead. I then make a tactical change. As Espanyol had 2 defensive midfielders and no central attacking midfielders, I felt we didn't need the 2 defensive pivots of our own. I gave Cacaret more freedom to roam while pulling Teemu alongside him, as in the number 10 role he was being outnumbered by Espanyol's 2 defensive mids. Espanyol were sticking to their game plan, but the crosses were being dealt with until Phil Foden threw a spanner in the works, opting to cut inside instead, finding Oyarzabal in a great shooting position, but the club captain himself, Virgil van Dijk, gets in the way of the shot and the keeper collects. In the second half, Espanyol were finding space out wide but could only test the keeper from range. And with Espanyol's crossing game, I was worried about the corner kicks. But from one of the resulting corner kicks, we hit them on the counter attack, and Vitor Roque with a beautiful feint sets up Moretti, who slides it into the bottom corner. Surely that's the 3 points in the bag. But Espanyol, determined not to give up, probe around the edge of our box and fire a shot off, which Cristante blocks, but it means Espanyol have a corner kick in the 87th minute. And we naively move El Shaarawy off the near post in the hopes of hitting Espanyol on the counter, but Pavlovic notices the gap and gets on the end of a diving header. However, we do manage to hunker down and hold on to the lead. So as it stands, on the last day of the season, as we visit the Camp Nou, we need Boca Juniors to get a win against Espanyol, but we need to pull off a massive upset against Barcelona. And of course, while we had to focus on our game here against the league champions, a win here would be worth nothing without an Espanyol loss over there. And while we struggled to get the ball off of Barcelona's possession-based football, Espanyol found themselves 1-0 up within 10 minutes. And just as we were getting into our stride and managing to get the ball off of Barcelona, the news that Espanyol had managed to find themselves 1 goal ahead reached the Camp Nou. So Jared Bowen, taking the situation into his own hands, holds off one defender while beating another before putting it into the near post, giving ourselves a 1-goal lead. And the Boca fans let out a cheer as the news of our goal reached their stadium, while there were boos at the Camp Nou as we were currently standing between Barcelona and the achievement of becoming Centurions. Both games then turned into a midfield battle as there was a tense atmosphere at both stadiums, and Barcelona were holding on to most of the ball in ours. But disaster struck as news again from the Espanyol game had reached the Camp Nou, with reports that Espanyol again had found themselves a goal, giving themselves a 2-0 lead. So at this point, with Boca Juniors 2 goals behind, the situation was largely outside of our control. But Boca were starting to find their footing in the game, getting some shots off on the Espanyol goalkeeper. However, back at the Camp Nou, we were really struggling to get comfortable in this match. Anytime we won the ball back, we actually couldn't keep onto it as midfield press from Barcelona was relentless. And Boca Juniors play a crossing game, but the Espanyol centre-backs were dealing with it well. And anytime we did manage to get past the Barcelona midfield, we couldn't find a chance. But the situation changed very quickly as Boca Juniors started crossing from deep, and a leaping header from Marcus Thuram struck off the post, which he managed to tap in. And ourselves, Atalanta, if we can't pass through Barcelona's defence, we'll dribble through it, and Moretti, weaving in and out, shocked the Barcelona fans. So just as we had given ourselves a cushion, Boca Juniors gave themselves a lifeline. But it was us who needed that lifeline more than Boca Juniors did. And with their newfound confidence, Boca would continue to test the Espanyol backline, but it would be our backline that would be put to the test next, as Marcus Asensio found himself in a good position out wide, and he fired it right at our goalkeeper, who parried it into Arda Güler, who slots it into the open net. So going into half time, it was a 2-1 scoreline in both games, but we needed that Espanyol result to flip. And Boca were making sure they were doing something about it as they again found themselves out wide, drilling it right into the 6-yard box, and Camavinga puts it away. By this point, we were happy with our lead, mostly defending and sending hopeful long balls up whenever we had the chance. But Espanyol were starting to find chances of their own, as now they needed to get a goal to go back ahead. And Jamal had gotten ahead of the Barcelona defender as he tried to pass it back to his goalkeeper, and he gets on top of the Barcelona goalkeeper, winning the ball. He's 1-on-1 with the keeper, but unfortunately the pressure got to him and Antonio Silva recovered. And in the 81st minute, Boca Juniors found themselves out wide again, choosing to do the same as last time, drill it low and hard, and they bury it from 6 yards out. So as it stands, we would qualify into the top 8, but Barcelona had different plans, as again, Marcus Asensio would fire at the keeper, but this time Provedel doesn't spill it into a Barcelona forward. And Boca Juniors, knowing the significance of their win, try hold on to the ball, as Barcelona continue to get shots off on our goal. And as news of the Boca win against Espanyol had arrived at the Nou Camp, we knew we just had to hold on to our leads to finish top 8, so we pull everyone back and park the bus, and despite Barcelona's best efforts, we managed to pull it off. We took Atalanta from bottom into Europe.